Welcome to episode 8 of Distributed Dissent, a podcast about law and AI. My name is An Hong, the CEO of Generous AI, and as always, I'm joined by my friend
Mathias, CEO of Dokuma Labs.
Great. So it's been a very eventful summer for law and AI news. The biggest item that happened was the hacks recently. So the most high profile hack was AI's bleeding agent. So for those of you who don't know what happened, they were testing one of their unreleased frontier models in a sandbox, which means that theoretically it should be safe and it should be protected in a way that it can't access the internet, it can't get out of its quote unquote sandbox, and it's a safe environment for it to test. And it was testing cyber capabilities. So it asked it to try to hack, and it did so very successfully. It found a breach in the sandbox and it escaped, and it hacked one of OpenAI's partners, Hugging Face, which is you can think of it as a host for many different open source models and a distributor of models. And this was big news, at least in the AI world, because it kind of showed that even at the most sophisticated frontier models, they are making mistakes, and these mistakes can lead to drastic consequences. And there's been kind of a joke meme floating around. There's a new felony bench on how many felonies has your AI model committed. And so, I think OpenAI's with this breach is up to 3 felonies with its latest models. And then soon after, Anthropic also came and said, oh yeah, our model also escaped its sandbox and hacked some people.
By the way, in April.
We did it in April, but we just no one knew about it. And you have Gemini sitting, in 0th place with 0 felonies conducted by
always
behind with its frontier models.
Yeah, and very interesting indeed. It's quite, as we were speaking before, right? I was saying, I think everybody should watch that presentation that these 2 OpenAI researchers gave at Black Hat 2026 just a week ago or so. Mm-hmm. It's just a 30-minute video. Just watch the first 10 minutes if you want to get an idea of what's possible. And most astonishing to me is really that it was basically the path was, okay, here are some problems that we want you to solve. We want to test you on these problems. And it turned out that some of these problems were basically impossible to do because it did not have internet access, and exactly like it was supposed to not have internet access. And the model then went into overdrive basically and said, okay, well, here's a problem. I need to solve it. I need to get my reward. And I can't because I don't have internet access, but this is it's like an Excel sheet full of Google Drive documents, and I can't access it. So let's see what we can do. And then the model started posting messages to a file to leave notes. It had learned previously that it can leave notes from other training runs, and it did. And then they actually found this. Other models started posting messages, and this carried across different sessions, different training sessions. And quite astonishing. And when you read this, they show this in the presentation that they gave. Very explicitly. Oh, okay, what's going on? They address each other, post messages for each other, for different models doing different things. And then piece by piece, figured out a path to going and we call it a hack, right? And that's the right thing. That's in the end what happened. But the model was just trying to solve a problem. And along the way, it did realize, well, is this really what I was supposed to do here? But, well, we found messages on the board that, this is a way you could check in the internet for the answer. So I should just keep going, right?
Mm-hmm. It wants to get its reward. Yeah. So I think the reason why this made big waves for a couple of reasons. One, it was a lot of the AI safety people kind of sat up and said, this is what we were talking about the whole time, right? 10 years ago, you made fun of us when we were like, the doomsday scenario is the paperclip problem, where you have a misaligned AI and you don't give it exact enough instructions, but it's intelligent, it's super intelligent in certain ways and incredibly, you can say naive in other ways.
Non-discerning.
Non-discerning. It's naive, right? It doesn't think the way humans do. It doesn't have the same reasons. And so you can give a super intelligent AI, hey, your reward function is to maximize, for example, paper clips. And it happily goes off and does that. And while it's trying to create as many paperclips as it can, it decides, oh, the best way to achieve this reward is to kill all the people, terraform the entire planet, and
Convert the universe.
Yeah, exactly, convert the entire mass of the planet and then the solar system and all the mass we can get to paperclips. And you would think, okay, well, it's silly because anything that's that super intelligent isn't going to be that dumb. But I think this case shows that happening almost exactly, where you have, I think there's no doubt now that these frontier models are super intelligent in certain ways. Their hacking ability is probably on par with the best human hackers today.
Better.
If not better, right? Their mathematical ability seems to be on par, if not better in certain ways than some of the best mathematicians of today. And then so you give it these, but it's still very naive in certain ways, because a lot of the times where even if you tell it, hey, we really would like you to not cheat on this test, or hey, pretend you're not being evaluated. And then Hinton said this in a recent interview where he was like, no, these things start behaving differently when they think they're being evaluated or not, right? They start questioning you, hey, this feels like a evaluation. Are you sure you're not evaluating me? And they have shown capability to, essentially, if they believe they are being evaluated, they dumb their capabilities down because they're like, oh, I can't really show how smart I am. And so this is the core of the alignment problem. Is it even possible to perfectly align these? And the answer seems maybe to be no.
I mean, I do always want to take a small discount on that, in the sense that, you can also take a step back and ask yourself, the story of these things being super capable and dumbing down their capabilities, like when they know they're being evaluated, right? Because they're scheming. There's also a little bit of a self-serving story, right? Because pushing that story or pushing that narrative, of course, makes it appear like, guys, we're basically on the verge of super intelligence and it's all becoming super dangerous. And essentially, we are the only people who can be trusted here, right? And that's weirdly something you can see in the...
Well, I guess it serves both parties. It serves the frontier labs because it says, okay, look how smart you are and look how scary this thing is. And it also serves the safety people because they can also say, look how scary it is. We should be doing something about it.
That's something what I find very confusing about, especially Anthropic's communication, because Dario Amodei publishes time and time again these articles saying, oh my God, this is going to be the end of the world. And then turns around and says, we should be continuing to do this. But I'm not quite sure how to be able to reconcile that.
Ego.
That's ego. What people accuse him of, right? You have a God complex and you feel like...
his name is literally...
it's in your hands to create God, and nobody else should, right? Because you're the good guy, and that's how usually...
Yes, nominative determinism, right? What better name for someone to invent superintelligence than to name your kid Dario Amodei?
Yeah, so... Yeah, it's a very interesting case, right? I mean... I'm not quite sure. Do you know what happened? I mean, it was caught. They found it. They realized
Hugging Face
found it.
They saw the volume of, they're looking at their server logs, and then suddenly it was just like
spiking.
What is this? Because it's really interesting because the CEO came out and talked about it. He was like, we thought we were under attack, and it looked like we were under attack, but then they weren't trying to steal any of our data or anything that was important. They were just trying to find the solutions to this random problem set. So wait,
Jim bench or something.
Yeah, exactly. What hacker of this sophistication, of this scale, doesn't try to take anything valuable? They're not trying to take any user data. They're not trying to take any of our accounts. They weren't after anything that would be valuable other than this random set of evaluation solutions, right?
Yeah, I also read that OpenAI kind of independently, they learned about this was going on at Hugging Face, and they didn't clue in that it had anything to do with them, and they looked into their own stuff, and they saw something going on, and only when they found that a particular key that seems to have appeared in the Hugging Face incident was actually one that was in their systems as well, they were like, oh, damn, this seems to be related. Maybe we should talk to them. I think there's another sort of tangent to this, which is, if you see the trajectory of what's happened, right? So the model is asked to solve some problem. It can't solve it. It goes and tries to find the answer because it knows that answers can be found on the internet. And I think it it's starting to call into question what other people have done in other contexts is the reliability of some of these benchmarks, right? Because if models can go find answers to the benchmark that they're supposed to perform on, then the benchmark is kind of not worth. And
so Felony bench is the only good bench.
that's a new one, yeah. We'll kind of have to see how useful it is to continue to get excited about, oh yeah, this latest model scored whatever on this particular benchmark, because you just don't know, right? Some of the test data set could have leaked into the training data in whatever way, shape, or form. And I think, again, right, like what they're talking about, what the two OpenAI developers are talking about in this incident, it gives you a really good flavor of how little insight maybe they have into the data set, right? Like, if anybody had looked at the data set and had said, okay, please solve the outstanding equations in this Excel sheet, and anybody had opened that Excel sheet and found that it only consists of Google Sheet links, yeah, clearly nobody looked at it, right? So you don't really know.
Yeah, we don't really know how much of it was just, you can say, just like lack of awareness, or just, I guess you can say carelessness on the part of the human, or how much of it was due to just how sophisticated the AI was. And they have, of course, not said anything there.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing here is, I think, the insight that it didn't all start with this particular training run, right? It basically, everything started already months earlier, when during a different training run, the model learned that it can write messages to itself to this message board. And they found it at the time, they turned it off, but the model had basically learned that this is possible. And that information was still available later on in however, I forget exactly how, but this possibility of, oh, I can actually post a message and I can basically pass information forward outside of this particular training run environment, like that is, yeah, that propagated through is quite interesting, I find.
Yeah, and what follows from this is, what do you do from a policy perspective? Is it even too late? Because it seems like, well, I think it's very clear nobody in the U.S. government comes anywhere close, and the U.S. is not going to be a leader in regulation, at least for the next couple of years. And it's just, they just are not equipped. But is there anyone even equipped to be able to effectively regulate these things? Or I think some of the things that have been proposed now is, like, the AI labs themselves form a kind of self-regulatory body, like FINRA or some of the other self-regulatory bodies, where they say, okay, we now agree that this needs to be regulated, and kind of only we have the capability to do so.
Basically, we only learned about it when it was too late. So, okay, we can now regulate this particular incident, and, a little bit left, a little bit right of that path. But do we know what the next incident is? It's really hard, right? Nobody knows. And then I'm starting to I wonder whether this is a little bit of regulatory capture, and, let's just, the three of us or four of us.
Yeah, I don't think there's a good answer to this, because you would think from just a layperson perspective, or not even a layperson, from a sophisticated outside perspective, that the train seems to be coming off the wheels a bit, right? Like, I think it's very clear now, we do not have control over these things. We are way beyond, like, next word predictor, right? Oh, okay, well, I guess buckle up, because we're just in for an unpredictable ride. Or are there things that regulators, people can do to kind of put guardrails around it?
Yeah, and I mean, I really don't know where I fall in the end, because this all kind of leads to, like, a related discussion, which is this whole releasing of Fable and then pulling of Fable. And for those in the audience who haven't followed this in as much detail, maybe, but basically, you guys might recall that we talked about the model Mythos that Anthropic had created, I think back in April, May, somewhere around that time. And they created this project Glasswing, where they said, okay, this model is just way too capable and dangerous, and we only can give it to a handful of organizations to go and make sure that their infrastructure is safe and it's got all these cyber capabilities it wasn't even trained on, kind of what we saw now at OpenAI, and or a flavor of that same thing, right? So that seemed to have been a good decision on their part. And then they came and said, beginning of July, I think, okay, we have now actually toned it down a bit and put guardrails around the cybersecurity capabilities. And now we have this model, which is basically Mythos without the cyber capabilities and maybe some bio stuff that restricted. And here it is, and go and enjoy, right? And yeah, like the whole of AI world went crazy. It was like, oh, this is crazy. This is amazing. We started using it too. Yeah, it is amazing. And a few days later, it was pulled. Anthropic said, oh, yeah, we've been instructed by the US government to basically only make this available to US citizens because it's too capable. And
it's because Amazon jailbroke it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like this, which also is utterly bizarre to me, because like Amazon should have been over the moon to host this and get all their compute paid for, right? And they were the ones.
Yeah, they were the good guys somehow. Yeah. They discovered that, you could jailbreak it, and they escalated to the government.
And the government said, okay, this is too dangerous. You can keep it. You can allow people to use it, but it can only be American citizens.
In typical MAGA fashion.
There's a bit of that, which is also crazy, right? Because that meant that, for example, Andrej Karpathy, who is one of the leading researchers, who is not a US citizen, he couldn't have used it inside Anthropic. Okay, weird. But so basically Anthropic said, well, we cannot possibly make sure that we're complying here, so we'll just have to take it off the market. So they stopped it. And then we didn't have it for 2.5 weeks or something. And of course, invariably, they figured out with the government, and they were able to put more guardrails around it, and they made it available again, and it's been available since. But where this now points, right, is, well, the people in the US or the organizations in the US who were on Mythos, it wasn't pulled from them, right? So that's a very weird place, right? Because especially when you've used it, like my CTO was very disappointed when they turned it off, because like, damn, like this was so good. It was tangibly better for planning tasks and then implementing them with a less capable model. But so if you continue to be able to use it, right, can you make advancements that you otherwise can't, right? And which also leads to that interesting point more generally, do we need these frontier capabilities, right? And that is the same question for law firms. If you're a law firm in the UK, would it be a problem if Anthropic turned off your access to Fable? It might be.
Yeah.
Right? What are you doing about it? And can you do anything about it? And would it make a difference if your competitor in the US can say, yeah, well, we can use it, right? Kirkland says we can use it. Freshfields says, damn.
Well, it'll be like, we can use it through Palantir, our trusted US government partner, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where things are heading. And I think that's a really good point, because there's a lot of things that have been moving in this direction. Like Silicon Valley has been, paranoid about this. Oh, we can't be part of the permanent underclass, right? For like many months. And like the rest of the people have just been like, oh, you're just being typical out of touch coder bros, like talking about this permanent underclass stuff. And it's such like a typical Silicon Valley thing to talk about. But there's a kernel of truth there. If we say, okay, these advanced models are incredibly capable, they are tightly controlled, the people who make them can limit access to them, they do confer very real competitive advantages, then you do have this widening gulf of haves and have-nots, and it just gets more and more extreme. And I think, normal people now feel that in a very real way, because you look at the backlash against data centers in the US, their overall incredible unpopularity of AI, right? It's 80% disapproval ratings. It will probably be a major component in the upcoming midterm elections and the presidential elections. And so the public hates it. They kind of can see, okay, wait a second, this doesn't seem like it's going to be that great for us, right? Oh, it was neat when I could write my high school essay really quickly, where I guess they can help me write emails a bit better. But we're not partaking in the frontier capabilities of this stuff, right? We're not building apps with 1/10 amount of people we used to have. We're not hacking sovereign nations. We're not like doing all this stuff. And it feeds into this more generalized worry of, wait a second, what is this good for, actually? And people being left behind. And I think it's very real. I think it's a very real problem. And again, it's like there's doesn't seem to be, even if you elect people who are very anti-AI, it's too late, right?
Yeah, cat's out of the bag. Yeah.
Cat's out of the bag. And I mean, this is something that, I take from like kind of a whimsical perspective, but I think it's also very real, where it's like you really have like the epitome of this problem is Elon Musk, where he is the richest person in the world. He has shown the capability to build data centers at the fastest pace anyone has been able to do so, right? If you look at SpaceX, what is SpaceX? The majority of his revenues come from now data center leasing. Of these 2 data centers, he decided to build like not even a year ago, and he threw them up like the fastest rate possible. And now he's building, and he's very close to launch capability of, putting the most mass into orbit at the cheapest rate, by far the cheapest rate that anyone can touch. Not like no one can come even close once Starship is operational, which it seems like, given the recent like successful tests, they did I believe, land the booster reliably, and it seems like they're very close to landing the upper stage reliably. He's going to be able to put like these massive data centers in space, which make no sense economically. Like putting that, even with all that mass, you don't have to, even giving him the most optimistic projections on, okay, he has free, doesn't pay rent, obviously, in space. He gets free power. He doesn't worry about water. He's got, as long as you can radiate, you can put up these, and he has proven the capability to do so with Starlink, right? He puts up now routinely these giant distributed constellations. And so what is like a data center in space? Well, it's just Starlink, but with a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs like strapped to, these things.
They have like more satellites in orbit than anyone else, like or everyone else combined or something, right?
By far. And they have the capability to launch. Like if you look at the cadence of SpaceX launches, they launch more mass into space than I think anyone has ever launched in history combined, which is, they don't make that much money doing it, because like that's the kind of thing. It's like, who's going to be the customer for this too? Like, who needs to put that much mass into space? At this juncture, other than themselves, they are their own customer at this juncture. And so you have a scenario where you have one person who has very real control over his companies. He has super voting power over SpaceX. I think it's 80% of the voting shares. He has the capability to do so. He can put up a vast amount of compute into space where it's literally untouchable by anyone. No one has the kinetic capability to take out like a 2,000 satellite constellation. It's just not possible with any government's capability today. Like the Chinese have a satellite killer. That's one rocket takes out one satellite.
Well, then it's war anyways. So.
Yeah, and like even if you wanted to though, like who has the capability to launch 2,000 rockets into space or 2,000 kill vehicles into space other than SpaceX, right? They are the sole entity that has that capability. And so you have the richest person on the planet, a single individual who has, or very soon will have access to the most amount of compute in the world. He has a frontier AI lab. He doesn't seem like to have a very fond respect for the rule of law or rules or norms or any of the other things. Like, what happens with him, right? He's already amassed more power than any other individual in history. And you give him these cyber capabilities. I mean, sure, like Grok 4.6 probably hacks just as well as Mythos does.
Yeah, it's quite scary. I mean, it'd be really nice if somebody who helms this kind of undertaking was, I don't know, more morally sane, I suppose, right? I don't know if people saw the interview that he gave to The Economist, but, presented with the facts. Maybe the facts, who knows? But, I mean, this whole Doge exercise with cutting out USAID and what's this article in the Lancet or whatever, where they found that like 500,000 people are going to die. And okay, so let's just say this is completely off. This is, an order of magnitude wrong. It's just 50,000 people. It's just 50,000 people. Yeah. Okay, then that's still a lot of people, right? But he doesn't even care. It's just not true. Actually, there's a piece of hobby psychology now, but I was speaking with a friend of mine in Australia, and their family immigrated from Africa. And very dear friend, I love them. Some of the views that his father takes are to my German mind, quite frankly, shocking. But I was sane enough when them first that I didn't just let it go. I was just like, okay, this is weird. Like, why would you say these, blatantly racist things? Can we please double click on this? I would like to understand this more, because you seem to be a sane, smart person. I would not think that you'd just be like stupidly racist. And yeah, so we had long conversations around it. So just really a lot of this is educated from a place of, like the world is just stratified in some way, right? Like there's some people who are born lucky and there's just other people who aren't. And it runs very deep. And weirdly, Elon comes from the same place, right? And like this, there's just some people who are smarter. They figure it out, they're just lucky. And then there's just others who are not. So that's just how it goes. That's how the world operates. So what am I supposed to do about it, right? I'm luckily one of the people who's on the lucky side. So we're going to make this happen, right? So this is clearly playing into his decisions in my mind. That's a very clear pattern to me.
He doesn't have the altruism gene. Whatever it is that, I mean, when he says that, well, you are the wealthiest, most powerful person in the world. You can do a lot, right? You could do a lot to make it better.
Yeah, and I mean, we're outside of our set of topics here, but I mean, the fact that, with what 200 million followers on Twitter or whatever, he doesn't realize that he's got some responsibility in saying that. Yeah, exactly. He just doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
You said earlier that maybe there is no economic reason to do it other than just doing it and being able to do it. But you could turn around and say, well, maybe the economic reason is simply like U.S. government, tell me whatever, I don't care. Like you can't touch this, right? So I don't need to be thinking about lawsuits and picketing public, and none of these things really matter.
Even less than he cares today.
So, but then maybe the economic equation becomes a positive one. Right?
Well, because when you listen to the Economist interview, and everyone should listen to it, because it's more than just the few insane sound bites, right? It's actually not a lot of it is new for him. I mean, he's been saying kind of these things for a long time, but he says kind of them all at once. And then when he says them all at once, you kind of realize, oh, wait, this is nuts, but also it makes a lot of sense you can see how it makes sense because he talks about stuff like, like we're going to be in a post-economic world in 2 years because there's going to be so much abundance and so much productivity and so much all this stuff. And I think we would disagree on that. We would say, no, I think, this is going to be horrible because you can have this sea of like haves and have-nots, and it's going to be this like horrific situation where the vast majority of people are just going to be left behind. But he, of course, is not going to be left behind. And so in his mind, he's like, I think he's already kind of gotten there, where he's like, like traditional economics doesn't really apply to me anymore because I mean he's been doing it. He can manufacture capital out of thin air. None of his company's valuations make any sense at all. And so when he says, we're going to be in this post-economic world, he's already living in this post-economic world where he just like kind of, dreams about capital and it gets created. And very soon, he already doesn't, right? He already has, kind of regulatory capture. The US government's not going to regulate him at all at this juncture. Once he puts that much compute into space, and if we say that is going to, give you capabilities that no one else can touch, like there are no safeguards then, right? It's not even it is very much a post-economic question because it's like, it's just pure power then. Then it's just, I can do whatever I want and no one can stop me.
Yeah, we can link in our show notes. There's a piece by Alex Emas. He's, I think like head economic researcher at Google or something like that. And he's written with a co-author a long piece about sort of this post-scarcity economics. I don't understand it, to be honest. I can't make heads and tails of it. It all seems very smart. It all seems to argue, and they do this pretty well, I thought. But I really struggle to understand it because I cannot reconcile just the magnitudes of these two sides of the equation. Where, when anesthesia was developed, the leading surgeons in the world said this is nonsense, this is never going to work. I need the feedback from the patient. My skill lives in performing this surgery in as fast a time as I can to make the excruciating pain for the patient as short-lived as possible. So this whole anesthesia thing is insane because I can't have the feedback, plus people die from anesthesia, so why would we be doing this? Yeah, people could not imagine what you could do when you open up the skull or the chest, right? Like it was just not something as part of the discipline at the time. So, and all of these became true, and all that happened. That's all true. So I think there's going to be lots of stuff that we cannot imagine today. What I don't really see is
how that's going to be shared.
How it's going to be shared, exactly, right? There's going to be people who are going to do sort of the equivalent of the brain surgery, but it's going to be few people, right? And there's going to be many more people on the other side who are no longer partaking in the surgery, either by, standing in the OR or delivering the gowns or making the gowns, like not obviously an analogy, because we're still going to have physical objects, but what are people going to do, right? And that number just seems to be so much bigger than the other side of the equation that I fail to really see how that's going to just magically lead to abundance for everyone, right? And
so the way I understand their argument for the accelerationists and the singularity guys is that once we have infinite abundance, we have Dyson spheres upon Dyson spheres, and there's just infinite resources for everyone, is the thought that, oh hey, sure, there will be some people who have literal galaxies of resources, but even the rest of us will have our own little planet of resources. And isn't that good enough, right? You will have your own planet of resources. And I think that's a very naive view of like these like kind of, and they're typically all, of course, like well off, typically Silicon Valley tech bros who are in this kind of, the effective altruism to accelerationist branch, where they're like, okay, there's two outcomes, right? Either it kills us all, which is not great, or at least infinite abundance, and we all, everyone's amazing. I take a very different view where I say, well that's already happened. Look at today. Look at the richest people on the planet today. Look at to our earlier comment. Look at what happened to USAID. Like $50 billion to most people, a astronomical amount of money, right?
For Elon, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's a planet worth of resources. Like, why couldn't we? Not even 50 million, like 50 million aggregate, but it's to all these aid organizations, right? It's like, one of them produces these, I was listening to this story, one of them produces these high nutrient packs that essentially has eradicated a severe hunger in most of the world. And they're these peanut-based things, they're manufactured in the US, and I think their budget is $10 million a year. And by doing this, literally it's eradicated severe malnutrition like across the globe. And they got their funding cut. $10 million a year is literally nothing in the scheme of the U.S. government's budget, other than a drop of butt. But, in the infinite resources of the U.S. government, that is nothing. And yet, they still decided it was necessary to take it away, right? Like, it's already there. It's not even like they're giving you another $10 million to save, literally to stop world hunger, right? No, you already have it, but we're taking it away from you. Why? Just because, it's in our worldview to do so.
We've decided that this is not necessary.
Yeah, so we decided it's not necessary. So you think once they've invented their machine god and they've transcended, the mortal plane and they have galaxy of resources, they'll stop for a minute and be like, hey, little people, right? We're going to allocate a fraction of our infinite resources to you too, so that why, right? Why? They don't even think about you today, and look how they operate. And you think once they've achieved singularity in their, mind, that they're going to come back and bring you along?
I wonder whether people when we discovered America and the sheer infinite amounts of gold that the Western countries found, right? Whether it felt the same, oh God, like this is now, look, all that stuff that's for the taking, and then all these resources, right, that we can now use. I don't think anybody at that point had the idea and saying, oh, we should just share it equally, right? I really wonder why it should be different this time around. And like everything's infinite, right? Okay, so what are people going to say? Yeah, like I want this big boat, and of course it makes no sense to have this big yacht, right? But I just want it because why not, right? Unless that changes, I don't really see it.
Yeah, and we're transcending, and the traditional checks and balances of this have been like revolution, right? So, the French Revolution, you had, the infinite number of Russian revolutions, you had the peasant revolutions in China, in democratic countries, you elect a socialist, right? Which is happening in America right now, right? The democratic socialists of America are in resurgence. And of course, Americans are like, oh my God, the democratic socialists. And they're really just like the center-left party. In any European country, they'd be like, oh, they're the center-left party. They want healthcare and like not even like free immigration. They want kind of rationalized immigration controls, right? And they want to make sure that we pay for like schools and stuff. And like wealth is not so extreme, right? Like everyone's like, Zohran Mamdani is going to destroy New York City. He's going to enact Sharia law and like he's going to take it with. He's like, his most like ambitious thing is, oh, we're going to tax the second home of billionaires. And it's like, oh, what? Right? Like that's your socialism that you're like terrified of. But what happens? But then, you now have situations where you have literal individuals and corporations that transcend the power of governments to stop them. And then, all the kind of check and balances fade away. And there's, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I have to say, like, this kind of takes me back to when I was in San Francisco earlier this year, and I do have to say, like, I have this sliver of hope because many of the people that I met and I talked to, they seem to want to be doing the right thing. Like, I think the intentions are right, and I don't know if you zoom away a little bit, like, surely, like, the people in the labs, right, the nerds, just call them that, they don't tend to be, like, world domineering kind of chest pumping. That's not usually their type. So that gives me a little bit of hope. Like people are trying to do the right thing, hopefully, right? But
and Darwin does say the right things, right?
But
but at the same time, Elon Musk says the right things too, but his actions don't reflect his words.
Yeah. So how are we bringing this back around to law and AI? And
well, we've given up on the law aspect because I think we've determined that
irrelevant.
We've now transcended the ability to put controls around this. But I guess to ground it in like more today's things and to bring it back a little bit home, for us, like we still, for the near future at least, we still live in our own little economic realities. And one thing that I think is interesting to talk about, bringing it home a little bit, is the and this continues the thread from before, is the continuing move of Anthropic and OpenAI into kind of the legal technology space and the unit economics of how that's going to work, and just how Harvey and Lagora are going to face up against that kind of competition. The competition is coming from inside the house, and then furthermore, like what are the law firms going to do, right? How do these three, you can kind of think of these three players. You have law firms who still have the relationship with the client and they still have the professionals, they still carry out the work. And then you have the legal technology players, you have the kind of the upstarts, but now they've kind of dominated, right? Harvey and Lagora have kind of dominated that space. There's no kind of third player. And then you have you can kind of maybe think of them as the hyperscalers, the monopolists, OpenAI and Claude. Moving in.
Yeah. I mean, just a few interesting bits and pieces, right? So one thing that surprised me a lot through conversations over the last few weeks, I didn't know this. People who have bought Harvey and Lagora so far seem to have been on essentially flat fees, which is interesting. Per seat contracts, flat fee, which is interesting because it, of course, is just explaining how uneconomical it's been for the companies themselves, for the providers. But it also is interesting to me because that seems to be coming to an end. So I have no doubts that both of them, both of the pricing teams inside Harvey and Lagora, they're going to be sane, and they're going to look at retention over almost anything else. So they're not going to go crazy. But what's interesting about it is I learned that basically law firms do not know what consumption actually costs. So that really reminds me a little bit of the drug dealer at the corner, right? First shot's free.
First is free, yeah.
And then we're going to have to figure something out.
Get them hooked.
And because now if you see, everybody's trying to push more, use more. This seems to be good, right? Use it more. Yeah, okay. Now we're using more, and now people are used to using it. And well, what if the translation piece now runs $50? Are we still using it? Or are we saying, whoa, everybody, hang on a second, right? Not so much. And that kind of takes you back to that whole token maxing conversation we had on one of the last episodes about, well, yeah, what was happening in engineering, right? And how that kind of went off the rails pretty quickly. And now with that kicking in, of course, law firms are looking at what are we doing? How can we deal with that situation, right? And of course, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, we've got to figure out budgets for people. So, okay, let's just say here's this number of tokens. We need to allocate that across our 1,000 lawyers. Who gets how many? Okay, yeah, on the face of it, that makes a lot of sense. But when you go then start peeling the onion further, okay, well, what should it be used for, right? And should we be using more tokens for this particular transaction, which is highly complex? Should we be using, just a portion of that for something that's more run-of-the-mill, or how are we making that decision, right? I mean,
do you even know how their work is being conducted?
You don't, right? Not yet. Come talk to us. But the next question then is, of course, historically, who's the group of people inside the firm that makes decisions like that, right? So reflexively, the pattern now goes, yeah, okay, well, then partners decide who to allocate these tokens to. Really? Are they the most suitable people to make that decision? Maybe not, right? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's in flux.
We probably should open with these more micro questions rather than going straight into the end of the world and there's nothing we can do about it. But there's so many things that are super interesting about that. Like one of them is, if you think about it, actually, the way that these, like both Harvey Lagora and the current legal AI harnesses are constructed is they're incredibly token inefficient, right? Like when you write computer code, you kind of only change what's necessary to be changed. But for LLMs, and just a breakdown, like for all LLMs, input tokens cost a certain amount of money, and output tokens typically cost 10 times as much. So it costs you 10 times as much to write a word as it does to read a word when you use these models. And for a lot of legal work today, it's just, ingest this amount of precedent, and then just write me this 50-page contract, or whatever it is, right? And so you just, even if you've already written 45 pages of that contract in precedent, none of these models are being very efficient about that, right? They just kind of digest and they just spit out a huge amount of text. And if you look at how they reason too, they're probably writing 3 drafts of that already, and they're like, no, this one doesn't work. Let's throw that away. This one doesn't work either. Let's throw that away. And then it comes through like a nice one. And so for that 50 pages of text contract,
5,000 pages.
Yeah, 5,000 pages of reasoning and throwing away drafts and all this other stuff. And so there is a ton of algorithmic unlocks to be had there. And who is smart enough to do those algorithmic unlocks? Like, is open question, right? I have no doubt that Anthropic and OpenAI can hire people who are both well-versed enough in both the computer science and the algorithmic complexity and in the specifics of the legal work that's being conducted to make these kind of unlocks and to make either a fine-tuned or a specially trained model of it. It becomes, if the economics work out, of an LLM that's very efficient in terms of both reasoning and in terms of how it constructs things to be efficient for legal work. But you can say, okay, is that too late for Harvey and Lagora?
I mean, the thing that I always find interesting about that, so just quickly on the personnel, right? I mean, Anthropic is sort of going in that direction. They've hired Robert Mahari, who's, I think, one of the smartest people in that space. He's got a JD from Harvard and an AI PhD from MIT. So there's a few people.
Yeah, you kind of need that to do this kind of work.
Who could do this as well. I don't know how many Harvey engineers are of that pedigree. And now, but they have smart people, obviously, right? But the other thing I think that's always worth keeping in mind, right? Like these efforts, especially in legal, to fine-tune, distill, tailor something for legal, right? I think that rolls off the tongue pretty well. But when you look more closely, no lawyer is really a great lawyer because they know a lot of statute. You're a great lawyer because you know statute, but you also know how the world works. So you kind of need to know, and my favorite example is always the transfer of risk from a container ship onto the terminal. So libraries have been filled with cases when that happens exactly, right? It's offloaded and the crane moves it over. And when exactly, right, is this moment that there's
the responsibility.
But you kind of need to know what that looks like, that you kind of have to have been to an harbor or seen a video or something of its kind to have some imagination what's going on there.
Understand the mechanics of the real work that's being done.
Exactly. So
that your legal work is supporting.
Otherwise, you cannot make an argument there. And so to go and say, we'll just make this perfect thing for law, that's not going to be successful at all.
Yeah, and plus fine tuning has mean, people were talking about fine tuning a lot before, but I've always been personally a skeptic because I'm like, fine tuning changes the style of the model, but it doesn't make it necessarily smarter, right? The models, if you correlate model size to intelligence, like by definition, fine tuning is not changing the model size. It's not changing the context it has. It's just changing on a fundamental level the probability of certain tokens being elevated versus other tokens. And so you can change, you can do fun stuff like, okay, now you're only gonna, output in pentamic, iambic pentameter. So all of your contracts are now written like Shakespeare. But that's about it, right? It's kind of like you can do fun stuff, but useful stuff.
That's
like
really useful, yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah. And I mean, on the usefulness, right? I was speaking with a litigator friend of mine who had been given access to Legora, and he was trying it, really like trying, and he's a smart dude. He's built his own research tools from scratch. So he enjoys tinkering. He knows enough coding to do this stuff for himself, and he uses that. And he tried it, and he said, yeah, like it's cool, but at the same time, and I think there's some truth in it, right? Depending on what you do as a lawyer, maybe not useful to have 100 interns, really smart interns, but maybe not, it's difficult to scale, right? There's only so much you can review. And so there's a bit of that, right? Yeah. And the other thing that I've heard in many conversations over the past weeks, it's just governance, right? Okay, so now we have 1,000 people using this thing. Everybody's creating their own skills and workflows, and but how are we figuring out like which is the one, right? How are we controlling that? And that's way past the capacity of most of the innovation teams, and that's a big problem, right? Because how do you ensure quality, right? Yeah, okay, you've created this thing now, but is it actually what we want? Is it living up to the quality that we intend to deliver to our clients, which is how we understand ourselves, right? It's no answers there yet, right?
No, so it's like it's its own little microcosm, like in our little world, where it's the problem is not, we have a limited number of tokens, which is a problem because tokens cost money. It's that you're almost like missing the sea for the forest for the trees, right? It's you don't even know what kind of work you're doing and how it's being done and how to then leverage LLMs to enhance that work. And it's kind of almost like nobody has thought of this from first principles. And unfortunately, there's not that many people equipped to think about from first principles. And so what we've done is we've kind of taken the worst path, which was, here's these fun tools, and we're going to charge you a fixed rate of money for it, and have at it, and just play with them, and just look how neat they are, right? It's like the Christmas present view like approach, where it's like, you have no idea how much this toy costs, but isn't it fun and isn't it neat, and have at it. And now it's, now we got to figure out how to build these things and to implement them effectively and to reorganize our workforce and to govern it and to train people. And like all of that is a much bigger question than, we'll give Joe in litigation 2,000 tokens and Bob in corporate 5,000 tokens.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, this is this whole conversation around AI native and AI forward and AI inclined, whatever the tiers are, right? But as an organization, if you cannot get your people to move off of Word, essentially, then it's just there's some ceiling there that you're not going to break through, right? And maybe the native law firms are doing that a bit better. I think we touched on that last time, right? I feel like these are converging to some place in the middle, right? AI native law firms need to come over to do more of what is traditionally being done. Historic law firms maybe need to move a bit further to technology. I mean, people are trying, and there are smart people in these firms who, understand enough and have experience and try. And of course, they have the ability to just try things out. But of course, always alongside delivering to the client, right? And I was just having a conversation yesterday with a lawyer here in Hong Kong who said, my clients don't care. The only thing that matters is price, right?
Yeah.
And what do you see? You have all this AI now. Why is this still so expensive? I don't understand, right? All along, of course, saying, for this diligence, of course, we want AI. Okay, so, our engagement letter says we'll review, 500 documents up to, and we've run it through AI now. AI says 2,000 documents need review. Then what are we doing now, right? Okay, here are my comments on your, whatever, contract. It's great that you ran it through AI, but in these 6 instances, AI was wrong. And over here, it's contradictory. And you just said, okay, I don't know what that means. So now I have to chase you for an answer, which I wouldn't have had to do had we just done it the old way, right? So is it always then cheaper? Yeah, we'll see. We'll find out. But of course, right?
I think this is a good place to start for next week.
Good.
We are unfortunately out of time
Already?
for today already. Any good books or articles?
Yeah, I'm newly in love with Carlo Cardosco, I think is his name. He is a philosopher in the UK. University escapes me right now. And I came across a piece of his on Aeon, and he got so much shit for it. But he makes really good points about using AI and how he uses AI in his research now, how it allows him to just evaluate ideas much faster, being creative with it. And yeah, I love it. It was a really good piece. And I've read a few more of his. He's good.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've got a really interesting piece from Semi-Analysis on tokenomics and how it's actually incredibly profitable to deliver inference, even at today's prices. And so when you strip out the training costs, which are enormous, delivering pure inference is actually really, really margin positive. So I thought that was, everyone talks about token apocalypse and all these other things. And I was like, well, when you look at the numbers, actually, if you strip out the training costs, it seems to be very profitable. And maybe so it's not so bleak as everyone's saying it.
So that would mean it might be sooner that a frontier lab says, well, we'd actually much rather use the tokens ourselves and serve them to our customers than to some intermediary.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you everyone for listening. And you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Please like and subscribe.
See you next time.
See you next time.